I got quite a few messages asking me to continue working through these ABRSM practice exams. So here we go with grade 4. So this is ABRSM grade 4, getting a little bit more advanced now. And once again, this paper comes from musictheoryhelp.co.uk, and I would recommend giving it a try before you have a look here, and you can see whether you got the answers right or not. So here we go. Grade 4 theory paper. This paper contains 5 questions, all of which should be answered. Time allowed 1 hour 30 minutes. Okay, fine. Question 1 says, the following extract, which begins on the first beat of the bar, requires 3 different time signatures. 1 at the start of each bar. Write in the 3 appropriate time signatures. So this is an example of a piece of music that isn't in a really regular meter. Instead, in fact, in each bar, there is a different time signature required. So the meter is changing all of the time, and it's up to us here to work out what exactly is going on. So let's see if we can do that. What I tend to do when I see one of these questions is sort of say, well, let's start with the easy stuff. Like, what can we get rid of? What can we get sorted out really easily? And this final bar here is the one that really stands out to me as being perhaps the most simple and straightforward to figure out what's going on, because we can count up the rhythm that's going here, and we can work out how much space is required for this bar very easily. So to start off with, we might be dealing with some kind of compound time signature with an 8 at the bottom, say 3/8 or 6/8 or 9/8 or 12/8. But, to start off with, let's assume that we're counting in crotchet beats and see if that works out for us. So what is going on in this bar here? Well, we've got a crotchet here, so that is a very good sign that we might be working with crotchet beats of some kind. And we've got these 2 quavers or 8th notes, which also add up to 1 crotchet. So we've got 2 crotchets worth of time. And because this doesn't really look like music in a compound time signature, it doesn't look like music that's in maybe minim beats instead of crotchet beats, I think this is a bar of 2 crotchet beats in a bar. So I think this is a bar of 2/4. And there's not a lot to suggest that it's anything else. So probably the simplest time signature for this rhythm is a time signature of 2/4. Now what's going on in this bar before? Let's continue counting in crotchets, but let's see if we can find out what's going on. And so start off with, we've got this dotted crotchet which lasts for 1.5 crotchet beats. And we've got this quaver which finishes that off, so those 2 together are worth 2 crotchets. And then here we've got another half, because this is another quaver or 8th note. And we've got our crotchet or quarter note, and then finally our quaver or 8th note. So if we add all these values together, we end up with 4. So this bar here has 4 beats worth of time in it. So it's actually a standard bar of 4/4, even though it's got this kind of syncopated rhythm thing going on. It's really simply just a bar of 4/4. So we can put that in there. So sometimes, even though the rhythm looks really complicated, actually the time signature could be something that we're absolutely, totally familiar with and we see all the time. And that's a really good example here. Now there's loads of stuff going on in this bar. So I'm going to guess that a bar of 4/4 time signature just wouldn't be enough beats to contain all of this stuff that's going on. And I think if we count up the note values again, we're going to find that's the case. So it starts with a quarter note, it starts with a quaver, which is an 8th note, half a beat. Then we've got this crotchet for 1 beat, a couple of quavers, so that's 2 more halves going onto the pile. Then we've got this quarter note or crotchet again, which is tied to another quaver. So what we've got so far, we've got a half, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3.5, 4. So up to this point, we've used up 4 beats already. So this is definitely not going to be a bar of 4/4 because we've already used up our 4 beats worth of time. So this stuff that comes afterwards is extra, and we've got to add that on. So we've got 2 more halves, so that's going to be 1. I'll just put that. So those 2 add up to 1 more beat. And then we've got this thing, which is definitely a half. We can deal with that quaver or 8th note very easily. But what's going on here? Well, this is a triplet, and while we're used to seeing triplets over the top of quavers, it doesn't mean that we can't have triplet quarter notes or triplet half notes or even triplet semibreves. Not that I've ever seen them, or triplet whole notes, but more commonly they tend to be over shorter notes. And what happens in every triplet is we take 3 of a particular note and fit them into the space of 2. So because we've got 3 triplet semiquavers or a triplet 16th notes, we need to remember that we're going to play these 3 notes in the space of 2 of those notes normally. So a semiquaver here, these 3 semiquavers would normally fit into the space of 2, and 2 semiquavers add up to an 8th note or half a beat. again. So these 3 notes add up to half a beat in total. So if we add together the 1 for these 2 quavers here onto our 4, and the 2 halves for this last beat here, we're going to find that we come up with 6 in total. So that's, a half, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3.5, 4, 5, 5.5, 6. So we've got 6 beats, or 6 crotchet beats worth of time going on in this bar. And for that reason, I'm going to call this bar a bar of 6/4, which means there are 6 crotchet beats in this bar. And hopefully that takes care of this first question. So moving along. Write as semibriefs whole notes to enharmonic equivalents of the last note of the first bar. Okay, this is interesting. So we've got this note here. This is the note we're talking about, this E sharp here. And an E sharp is not a note that we commonly find. We tend to not talk about E sharp all that often because its normal name is an F. So the first thing we could do is draw in an F, because this thing here, enharmonic equivalent, just means something that sounds the same. So we've talked about this lots of times before, that an E sharp is exactly the same note. It's the same place on the keyboard. It's the white note next to the E, to the right on the keyboard. And so if you play an E sharp and if you play an F, those 2 notes are going to sound exactly the same. And that's what makes them enharmonic equivalent. So for that reason, I can put in an F here. And that's my first response. Now I've got to come up with another note that sounds the same as an E sharp or an F. Now that might sound pretty difficult. How on earth are we going to do that? Well, there is one way that I can think of to do that, and that is to use a G double flat. So I'm going to put a G in, and then I'm going to put in 2 flat signs. Well, I'm going to try and put in 2 flat signs if I can draw these. Okay. That's not bad. Okay, so what I've drawn in there is a G double flat. And don't forget, when we use that double flat sign, what we're doing is we're bringing the pitch of the note down by 2 semitones. And so if we think about a G, and we move a G down by 2 semitones, or a tone in pitch, we're going to end up with an F. And of course, an F will sound like exactly the same as an F, the same as the note we've written at the start of this bar, and it will sound the same as an E sharp. So what I've done here to answer this question is I've written in 2 notes which sound the same as this pitch here of an E sharp, and I've written them in semibriefs or whole notes to just indicate I know what's going on. Okay, so we've got some give the meaning of this stuff questions here. We've used allegro quite a few times now. Allegro means quick and vivace means lively. So I'm going to put quick and lively tempo. That's easy enough. And this next thing is asking us for sempre PP. So we see that at the start of this little extract here. Now, sempre is something we see quite a lot next to dynamic markings. They tend to come together. Now, the easy bit probably is to work out the dynamic marking. So this is PP, which means pianissimo, which means very, very quiet. But we've got this sempre thing to sort of contend with as well. And now sempre just means always. So what it's really telling us is it really wants us to keep it always quiet at that point until we get to this F. So at this F we'd obviously get a lot louder. But for these 6 notes here, we're going to just keep the level of dynamic really, really quiet and really out of the way. So for sempre PP, I'm going to put in that it has a meaning of always. Oops. Always very quiet. Okay, and finally we've got to explain what this thing is. Well, we've talked about this a little bit already in that it's it's a triplet set of triplet semiquavers. Now that means we're going to fit these 3 notes into the space of 2. So probably to define the meaning of this, I suppose you're going to say something like play 3 notes in the time of 2, I'm just going to write 16th notes. Something like that. So it's saying we're going to play 3 of these 16th notes in the time it would normally take us to play 2 16th notes. And that's the whole point of our triplet idea. And I think that brings us to the end of question 1. So I will see you for question 2.